Well, good to see you guys. If you are new with us, we always leave some space just to open up the Bible together and the story of God and try and ask what does it look like to live that out? How do we actually put this into practice? And we've been in a series looking at the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' famous teaching, which you find in Matthew's Gospel. And so we've been doing that over the last little while. I'm going to finish that today. And what I want to do with you really is I'm going to just announce what Jesus taught in my own words, almost as if you're hearing it for the first time. It's just my take on it, but it's my understanding of where we've been, because we've been over maybe 7, 8, 9 series where people have input different things, and hopefully you've been kind of journeying it. I'm just going to share a little bit, and then I'm going to close with Jesus' response. He has a way that he closes his sermon that invites us to make a decision about something. So that's where we're going to go. But before we do that, I've got a question for you. So we've been in Sermon on the Mount. Some of you have only been here for this week, and that's okay. So don't worry if you don't have an answer. But some of you have been reading it. So give me your feelings in one word, okay? So one word answers. What has been your response to reading this sermon or hearing the teaching on it? How have you felt in responding to it? So one word answers, shout. Challenged, yeah. It's hard to read the teachings of Jesus and not be challenged. I tell you, I have really been challenged by it. What else? You're very shy this morning. Humbled, yeah. Like, I don't know how to do this. Like, this is hard. Anything else? Encouraged, yeah. So it's not simply challenging teaching, it's also deeply encouraging. It's a way to life. A couple more. Or maybe one, since I'm just doing it slowly. I might be here all day. One more word. Or does that cover it? Challenging, humbling, encouraging. That's probably a pretty good summary. We'll leave it there, shall we? Well, I don't know if you remember where we started, but we started in the area of blessing. Like the whole of the Beatitudes, Jesus' teaching starts with this announcement of blessing. And I've got some images which may relate if I can do it together. If I can get it coordinated, then we'll be great. But it starts with this moment of blessing. Jesus announces to the crowd that's with him, and it's a mixed crowd of all sorts of different people, lots of people from different backgrounds. His first announcement is, "Blessed are you." And then he lists a series of things that people wouldn't expected that God would have been blessing, things that would have been people that would have been with him in the crowd would have described them. And he announces this incredible blessing. And this word blessing is a really interesting one, but it's like this picture here. It's God's face leaning toward you. So Jesus stands up and he announces to this crowd that probably for the most part felt like they were on the fringe, and he says, "Blessed are you. God's face smiles toward you." Like, that's good news. That's encouraging, right? I don't know where you feel you are today, but it's this idea that you maybe think that you're abandoned because life has been tricky. Maybe it's left your spirit broken. Maybe you feel emotionally bankrupt. Maybe you're exhausted and without energy or hope to move on. And Jesus stands and he says, "Blessed are you, because God's favor and blessing is toward you." You feel like God's abandoned you? I tell you, God is for you. In fact, his face is toward you. This blessing belongs to you. In fact, the whole of the kingdom belongs to you. Maybe you think that life has been just a series of bitter disappointments. Maybe that's your experience. Like, you feel that it's just throwing you all sorts of curveballs. You've experienced disappointment and loss. Maybe you are grieving literally for people or for things. And it would be easy to say, like, God is just throwing me a bitter lemon to chew on. Life is rubbish. Like, life is, and Jesus stands and he says, if that's you, blessed are you, because God's face smiles towards you. In fact, he is going to bring you comfort. Like, that's incredible news, isn't it? Incredible news. Maybe you've been fighting for justice. Maybe you're crying out for God to do something. Maybe your voice feels like it's just a quiet whisper and nobody is hearing it. Maybe you feel like no one is listening to the issues that you're experiencing. Maybe when you cry out or you pray or you shout out to those who are in power, it feels like you're hitting an iron ceiling. And Jesus announces and he says, "Blessed are you. God's favor is towards you. He has heard your cry and has an inheritance for you." Good news, isn't it? It's incredible news. Not only that, but then Jesus goes on, he talks about those who have had to fight for integrity, who work for justice in this world, who look to treat others well even when everyone else feels like they're not doing it. The peacemakers, the seekers of righteousness. And even though others may not understand what you do, even though you may be treated with contempt, persecuted because you associate with me, Jesus, blessed are you because you have a reward that is coming. It's incredible news, isn't it? Like, that's how it all starts. Don't forget that, because it is hard. It's challenging teaching. But it starts with this experience or announcement of blessing. God smiles on you. Like, when was the last time you just thought about that? Like, when was the last time you sat and you woke up and you thought, God, you smile on me this morning? Like, when was the last time you just took a moment and allowed that experience to be yours? Like, because life throws all sorts of stuff that doesn't feel like blessing, right? And it can feel like sometimes that then becomes this lens through which we see God. I think, God, have you abandoned me? Like, you're not gonna do something about this thing? Like, what is going on? And he says, I'm here. Like, I'm smiling on you. Don't lose sight of that. That's where it starts. And then it moves into this moment of not only that, yes, you have received blessing, but I want you to, having received blessing, to be a blessing. Like, that is your commission. That is what you are called to do. You are a people who have received blessing from God. You didn't expect it. But now I'm inviting you to be a blessing in the world. And the world needs God's favor. It needs his smiling face on them. Johnny used this lovely language that Eugene Peterson uses to bring out the God colors in the world, to bring out the God flavors in the world, to be salt and light. And sometimes light shines stuff on things that people don't want to expose. Sometimes salt to a wound is uncomfortable. It's not always easy to be salt and light, but ultimately it is the role of us who have received blessing. You've received blessing. Be a blessing. He goes on, he says, like, this is my way. This is the way to live the way of God. And it's not a new thing. This is the fulfillment of the story of God so far. It's the law and the prophets being fulfilled. And then you get to what Jesus starts to dig in, the teaching that we've been talking about that's super challenging. Do you remember this picture? This is this idea that we are part of an ecosystem. But Jesus then takes a series of cases to look at our sin. And he says, look, okay, you've heard your religious leaders trying to live. And he says, but if you actually want to live the way of Jesus, you're going to have to go beyond the morality of your religious leaders. You're actually going to have a deeper righteousness than they have. Because they have something that looks okay on the outside, but actually if you were to dig deep a little bit, is rotten. In my way, you can't have rotten roots. You need to have roots into my love because I want to go to the root of your stuff. And so he starts to tackle that. He says, okay, you've heard it talked about don't murder. That's the external command. But actually, let's get to the heart of where murder starts. Let's talk about anger. And he says, okay, let's deal with the root. He says, okay, you've heard the command, don't commit adultery. You feel like you're doing that. But let's get to the heart of where that starts. It starts in your mind and your imagination with what you look at and think upon. Let's get to the heart of that. He talks about how we use our words, not using words to manipulate and deceive and to use other people, but actually using them to honor and to bring grace and to speak out for justice. He starts to challenge some of the systems in society. He talks about marriage and divorce, but he's challenging the way in which sin has actually got into the structures of power and that we need to not be complicit in it, but actually be people who work for justice against it. He's not interested in going on the surface. Jesus goes right to the heart. And that's why it's challenging. That's why we talk about when you read the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount, it's hard. Like, it does not let you away with anything. It's right at the heart, and it's hard to read it and it not to read you. Like Andy was saying last week. And then Jesus talks about, okay, that's the root of some of the broken stuff in your life. When you deal with that, here's a way that goes to the root. The kingdom gets to the root. But then I've also got a way to live in this world that's different than what you're seeing. And my way offers a different way to this ever-increasing cycle of violence and division. Actually, I don't want you to be part of that. I don't want you to be someone who just retaliates out of anger and gets it back at the other person. You may have lived that way. You may even have rules in your law that say that, but I want you to go to a different way. If you are to be a people of blessing, I want you to learn to live in this world where you love your enemy, where you are someone who forgives those who persecute you, that you actually find creative ways that are non-violent to challenge injustice. You don't get caught into just doing back what someone has done to you and increasing and feeding this cycle of division and violence. And that's where it talks about turn the other cheek, go the extra mile. Love your enemies. If that's not clear, that's it. It's really, really simple. Love your enemies. That's what loving looks like. That's what my way looks like. And this is what my Father's like. Like, he shows mercy to those who deserve it and don't deserve it. He allows the rain to shine on the good and the evil. And he finishes with this, like, be perfect. Okay, just give you a challenge. Be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect. I mean, are you serious, Jesus? Come on, like that's impossible. Be perfect. Another way of saying that word perfect is be complete or be mature. He's not creating this impossible standard. He's saying, look, to be complete is to be a person of mercy like my Father, who is able to love and pray for those who persecute you. Not easy teaching. It's challenging. And then he starts to talk about, and you can read all this, by the way, in Matthew chapter 5 through to 7 and check that I'm teaching you right. He goes on to talk about the things that when you try to live the way of Jesus, the way of the kingdom, are going to try and get you off track. So he says, don't be seduced by human approval. Okay, don't do things so that others will see you do it. If you do something that you think is right so that others might see it, that's going to produce something pretty broken in you. That's what my religious leaders do. I want you to do something different. I want you to have a practice of hiddenness so that when you do something that is right, you do it because it is in you, not because someone sees it. Because if you do something to be seen, to do something, after a while, you will live to be seen. And what you'll find is you look like you've got it, but roots, they're not there. So you have this outward expression of goodness, but inwardly you're thirsty for approval. Jesus says, don't do that. That won't get you in my way. He says, don't be seduced by stuff. Like, I want to bless you. That may involve having a lot. It may involve having resources. If you have resources, don't be duped into thinking that your resources are going to cover you. And don't try and get more and more stuff in thinking that if you get more and more stuff, you will be secure in life and life will be wonderful for you, because that is not the way to life. And actually what it will do, if you've had a lot, you'll know this. The danger is you get more and more stuff and it cushions you more and more from those in need. And you stop being generous because you feel like you need it. And you stop caring for the poor because you feel like you need it. He says, don't do that. Be generous with what you have. Practice generosity with the poor. Spend time with those who don't have a lot so that you don't become cushioned in a nice little house way on the hill away from everybody that's in need. It's okay to have stuff, but just be careful with it. And likewise, if you don't have a lot, like if you're struggling on the breadline, don't get racked with anxiety. Don't be so worried that all you can think about is where your next meal is coming from, because that is a reality. Know that my Heavenly Father knows what you need before you ask, and He will cover the bill. Trust Him for plenty or for not a lot. He has what you need. Practice forgiveness for those who hurt you, and you'll experience the freedom of my forgiveness. Don't look down on others with contempt. Be merciful and tender with them. Don't judge them, because actually I want you to be a source of blessing in their life. I want you to be able to help them with the things that are hurting. And if you judge them and you show contempt as though you're better, then you cannot help. It's like what Andy had last week, this massive plank just causing all sorts of damage around you. Don't be like that. Be merciful, tender-hearted, so that you might be a source of life to those around you. And all of it boils down to this: trust me. Seek my kingdom first above everything else. Seek my way. And all this other stuff that you're trying to figure out in life, I will help you figure it out with me. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't grab for what you need in broken ways. Don't grab to use other people to get what you need. Ask me for it. Seek me for it. Knock, and the door will be open to you. I am someone who wants to give. Remember the start? Blessing has been announced to those who are the most unlikely candidates. No problem. Easy. Yeah, I'm on board. I mean, it's so life-giving. Like even just speaking that out, and that's just my words. It's like, oh, I can't find a better way. And yet it's hard, right? Like, it's hard. It's not easy to live. Seek, ask. So, now that you've heard that, and you can read the actual words in the Gospel of Matthew if you want to, now that you've heard that, like, what do you do? Like, that's my question. Is like, first of all, it's like, help. God, help. I don't know how to do this if you're not helping. Like, this is not possible from a human point of view. My second question is, what do you do with that? And beautifully, Jesus, in his wisdom, finishes with a series of responses. And if you want, we're not going to read it all together, but if you want to follow along, actually, in fact, you know what? Let's read it together. I changed my mind mid-flow. I want to finish with this, and it's hard. Like, it's Jesus in his teaching doesn't let us away, like, with, oh yeah, nice teaching, Jesus. That's a cool philosophy. I'll go away and think about that. It doesn't really let you away with that. It has a certain kind of weight to it that kind of forces you to respond in some way. Like, it forces you to either say, no, not interested, or okay, but that's going to change some things in my life. And you'll see what Jesus does in a moment. So let's read it together, and then I'll take a short moment just to do that with you. So let's read it out. I'll read it out to you, sorry. Enter God's kingdom through the narrow gate. The gate is large, and the road is wide that leads to ruin. Many people go that way. But the gate is small, and the road is narrow that leads to life, and few find it. That's hard. Come back to that. Then he goes on, watch out for false prophets, people who try and use words to deceive you. They come to you pretending to be sheep, but on the inside they are hungry wolves. You ever heard that phrase? Sheep in wolves' clothing. Is that the right way around? Or wolves in sheep? Wolves in sheep's clothing? Yeah, thanks. I knew there was something not right about that. That's where that comes from. You can tell each tree by its fruit. Do not people pick grapes from bushes? Do they pick figs from thorns? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree can't bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down. It is thrown into the fire. And then he finishes with this. You can tell a tree by its fruit. Second parable. Really tough going. Okay? Come back to that. And then he says this little phrase in between, which is a bit of a key to understanding what he's trying to say. Let's read it together. He says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we drive out demons in your name? Didn't we do many miracles in your name? Then I will tell them clearly, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who do evil. You thought he was going to kind of bring it down to like, just chill out at the end. Jesus, no, he ramps it up. Tough going. And then he finishes with this. So then, everyone who hears my words and puts them into practice is like a wise person. He builds his house on the rock. The rain comes down, the water rises, the winds blow and beat against that house, but it does not fall. It is built on the rock. But everyone who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. The rain comes down, the water rises, the wind blows and beats against that house, and it falls with a loud crash. We'll come back to that. And then it finishes with this statement. The people that were listening were astonished because the teaching of Jesus had such authority. You can feel it though, can't you? Like you can feel, and it's not my authority, it's the authority of the actual words. We just read them out. Like you can feel the weight of them. Like it's hard to read those and go, yeah, no problem. There's something powerful about those words. So let's just very quickly look at these three parables that Jesus tells and what it leaves us with. The first parable is the parable of the gates. So you got a narrow gate and a wide gate. The narrow way is the way that leads to life. The wide way is the way that leads to death. The narrow gate is difficult to find. The wide way is easy and everybody goes on it. What's Jesus getting at? Very simply, I think he's saying something like this. You can't just play at this. Like it's not that kind of life. My teaching is not like this thing that you just pick and choose from. Like you're either all in or you're not going to get there. It just requires it. And so many will go with the flow, and we've talked about this before, but like the road of least resistance, the easy way, that is the way of unintention. You just find that road without trying. But to live the way of Jesus takes focus. It takes intention. It takes something of a decision to go that direction. Otherwise, you're not going to find it. And you think Jesus is being harsh, but I don't think he is. I think he's trying to say, look, this is just the reality. And for me to tell you something different is to say, yeah, just have a go. And it'll be okay. No, actually, if you want to live this way, you've heard the teaching. Like you can't just have a go. It requires so much of you. It's like a narrow gate that few find. So don't do this at a superficial level. Make a decisive decision to follow me and my teachings. That's the first part. Second one is this parable of two trees. And there's lots of things in this. It's about discernment. It's about not being duped by people who look like they've got what the kingdom is, but it actually isn't. And he's saying, look a little bit deeper, like scratch the surface, check out their life. Is it actually adding up? And we're not talking about perfection. We're talking about like integrity here. So there's that part of it. But there's also this idea, I think, in this phrase that like you can't fake it for long. Like you can't fake the way of Jesus for long without at some point your roots being shown. Like you can look like you've got it, you can talk like you've got it for a while, but after a while, if you don't have the roots in my kingdom and in my love and in this way, then the fruit that will begin to show in your life will be fruit that's from a different root system. And after a while, you'll see it. And so Jesus says, look at that fruit, because that will tell you what this life is rooted in. It'll tell you what they're spending their time and their energy on and where they are finding their source. And if their root system is for you to see them, remember we talked about that, is to be seen by them, then at some point that'll collapse. And then finally he sums it all up with this last parable, which is probably the most challenging. You've got house of sand or rock. Which house are you? Which house am I? And you've got the house on sand, which is what? Very simply, hearing something, but not what? Does anybody remember? Not putting it into practice. So it's no good hearing this stuff and not doing something with it. It forces us to put it into practice. Those that hear the message and put it into practice, those are people who build their house on a rock. And both of those people are going to experience difficulty. The winds will come, the waters will rise, but the life that will hold is the life that hears and puts it into practice. Challenging, isn't it? Like it doesn't let you just hear it and go, yeah, no problem. It actually does something. It requires something of us. It requires some kind of response, some kind of decision, whether we've been following Jesus for a short time or a long time. It doesn't really matter. Every time I read this, it asks something more. It goes to the heart of something that needs a decision and an action. And I'm sure you hearing it are finding the same. And in the middle, we won't look at this for long, but like Jesus gives this phrase. He says, look, looking like you're doing the stuff even is not enough. Like you can look like you do this, even the cool stuff like the prophesying and the deliverance and the miracles, you can do that stuff. But if you didn't root it in me, you didn't seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, if that wasn't your pursuit, my love and blessing, then there's this harsh thing of like, I didn't know you. Like it's not enough to do it. There's something in knowing him and out of knowing him, obeying him, that's deeply important. And so maybe that's the decisive moment for you, is actually, I don't know if I know him, I want to. And that's easy. Like the teaching isn't hard, but knowing him is easy. And actually without knowing him and without knowing his love, it's really hard to do this. I would suggest, I don't know if it's possible. And maybe that's what Jesus is getting at, that if you want to live the way of Jesus, you're going to need to know my love. Because you can't love your enemies if you don't know me. If you aren't experiencing and receiving my love. And I don't even know that that part is a judgment. I think that's an invitation. So what do you do with that? Well, what does Jesus invite you to do? I think it just invites us to respond. And like what you might respond with is different to what I might respond with. I know that there are some things that Jesus is putting his finger on in my life that I need to respond to. And if I want to live the way of Jesus, it takes decisive action. Like I have to make some decisions to stop and to start, to engage or to disengage. Like they actually take something, require something. Maybe that's you. Like maybe there's some things you've been reading and actually it requires a response. It requires, okay, Jesus, I'm in again. Like I've been sort of drifting around, I'm in again. Or, you know, that thing of anger that I've sort of just been like managing. I actually want you to get to the root of it. And I don't know how, I'm in. And there's a decision to get before him. Maybe it's, I don't know if I know you well. I would like to know you more. And it's a decision moment for you. What does that look like? So I'm literally just going to create some quiet. It's awkward. Silence is awkward. You'd probably like some music in the background. Maybe that would soften it a little bit. But I'm literally going to just create some space for 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm just going to trust the Holy Spirit, who is God's presence and power, who actually is the one who breathes this teaching into us. I'm just going to let him do what he does, which is begin to speak to you and challenge you and maybe reveal himself to you in a way that you need. And I'm just going to pray. I'm going to leave some quiet, and then I'm just going to pray a little bit of response, and I'm going to ask God if there's anything else he wants to do. That's it. It's not complicated. This stuff isn't necessarily complicated, but it is challenging. And like, I'm not trying to create the challenge, hopefully. I feel like the text does that for us, and so I'm trying to be true to the challenge that Jesus gives himself. So let me pray for us and see what he wants to do with you personally. Lord, I'm aware that your teaching is strong, but I'm also aware that it is life. I haven't found anything more beautiful and wise. And every time I read it, it both cuts to the heart and stirs me with fresh passion for you. I love that at the heart of your invitation is blessing. The invitation to know God's grace and favor for you personally. And if that's you, I pray that God's favor would be experienced by you this morning. And Lord, the teaching's just hard. Like, it's just challenging. And Lord, it wakes us up out of our kind of mediocrity at times. Lord, I ask you to speak to us in the areas that you want to deal with, not because of this like thirst for judgment, but actually because you long to move in us. And you long that we would experience a life that is full. And you long that we would be a source of blessing. And so the only reason you go to the heart of this stuff is so that we might live in that way in greater measure. So will you come and just put your finger on the things that you want to put your finger on for us?
Joining us at Foyle Vineyard Church. We love walking out this adventure of being a family together on mission. If you've joined us for the first time today, we'd love to connect with you further. Head over to our website, www.foylevineyard.co.uk, and click I'm New to keep up to date with all the ways in which you can get involved with this busy family. Have a wonderful week, and God bless.